The Minnesota Wild ended their losing streak, and Marc-Andre Fleury hit a milestone. Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild is here to talk about that and all things Minnesota Wild next on the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Lots of things going on right now in Minnesota, and that means we bring in Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild to talk about that. And Seth, let's just start with this. Psychologically, how important was it for this team to get a W against Columbus the other night?
Gil, it was huge. They've been reeling, and the injuries just continue to mount for the Wild. Now, they did get Matt Zuccarello back, but it's dicey because you are right in the midst of trying to get yourself back into postseason conversation, missing like 6 of your top 10 players on the roster. And so it was a huge win for the Wild, and it is no coincidence that Marc-Andre Fleury played a huge part in it with just adding one of the great sequences since he came to Minnesota, getting caught between going to the bench for the empty net. And then all of a sudden, Columbus with a turnover, so he had to fly back to the crease to try to prevent the empty net goal. Guy is just he's just A+, just unbelievable, and the team is really, it seems, rallied around him as all these other players have gone out of the lineup.
What is it about him? I mean, obviously he's experienced, but what does he bring to this locker room that allows him to lead like this?
Well, I think especially in times like this, you've got so many young players on the roster that are not really sure what they need to do. Like, obviously, the Wild have a ton of great young players in Brock Faber, Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy. But a lot of times, rookies in big key situations will look to a veteran to be the one to lead. And, Fleury making just a ton of unbelievable saves. He had a glove save where he was able to just snag the puck like right off the end of the glove in overtime to keep the game going. And so I think players resonate with those types of things like, oh, if he can make a big play in this situation, why don't I go help him out? And the fact that he continues to climb the wins leaderboard in the NHL, I think the team really wants to be able to help get him that milestone so that they can help celebrate with him. He's been a part of this lineup for the last couple of years and has just become a fan favorite, has become a favorite in the locker room. And so, he's the perfect guy, I think, to rally around. And it seems like the team certainly did against Columbus.
And he still seems to be enjoying himself out there.
Oh, yeah, he's enjoying himself. And it's interesting, too, because when Philip Gustafsson got hurt, my worry was not about Fleury being able to handle a regular workload again, because he's been more of the backup this year than the 1A, 1B. My worry was not about him being able to step in and get back to regular starts, because he keeps himself in just outrageous shape. He's a rink rat. He is just a guy who is always on the ice, always working. So I wasn't worried about that as much. My worry was what happens if he ends up getting injured, because, Jesper Wallstedt, the top prospect in the Minnesota Wild's farm system, their goalie of the future, he's coming back from an injury too. And so it is just kind of dicey behind Fleury at this point. But honestly, the way he plays, he's been a very demonstrative goalie his entire career. So it's not like it's not like as he got older, he had to try to do more of that to make saves. This is just how he's always done it. And so being somebody that is always that mobile and that active in the crease, you don't worry as much about somebody sustaining an injury because he's used to that range of motion pretty much every time he goes out on the ice.
Yeah, no question. What's been missing this year in Minnesota? It seems like they've been so inconsistent. You have winning streaks, losing streaks. I know injuries are a part of it, but there seems to just be something intangible that isn't there that's been there in the recent past.
I think it's the confidence. When John Hines took over, that was one of the big ingredients that was missing that he was able to harness and get back. Was this is a team that plays when they're confident, they're playing extremely well. They have the ability to grab the early lead and hold it. And that's just something that as the losses mounted, as they piled up early in the year, it was a lineup in which I think a lot of players just did not want to be the one that made the mistake that lost the game. And I can resonate with that logic because, you think about any of us in our normal lines of work. I don't like making mistakes. I don't like making mistakes that impact the bottom line. And so I certainly resonate with that. I think as the wins have started to come back, it has been pretty clear that having Hines switch this to more of a modern style NHL lineup and offense has really helped as well. But ultimately, I think it was a situation where the car was going downhill and Dean was just not going to be able to get it to stop. And so whether it's his fault, whether it's not, at some point you just have to make a change to really jolt everybody back. And for the most part, with the exception of the injuries that have just sapped this lineup, for the most part, the results have been really good since John Hines took over.
What do you expect to happen at the trade deadline? I mean, it obviously will depend on how they do between now and then, but let's say they're right around where they are now, where they're on the outside looking in, but they're not that far away. Do the Wild go in to try to make the playoffs this year, or do they take a step back and say, we'll regroup and come back next year with some more picks or prospects?
This is an interesting one, Gil, because I think the Wild are going to view this as if we get everybody back, we can make a run. And so they don't have money per se to be able to make any big additions at the trade deadline unless they pull salary off the roster. So there probably isn't going to be more than maybe a third pairing defenseman type move to bring somebody in who can be a little more consistent in that spot. Beyond that, I think Bill Guerin just looks at this as if we can get everybody back and healthy, that this is a team that is capable of playing with the best of them in the Western Conference and getting back into this playoff push. And until they're able to do that, it's all about just trying to keep your head above water and not fall too far behind. But it is going to be interesting because that's been, I think, one of the big staples for Bill Guerin since he took over, is that where you expect things to go, he usually has a move or one or two moves in store, and is somebody who is very much in favor of making those hockey trades to where if you have a guy like, I'll just throw John Merrill's name out there on the third pairing, where maybe you view him as like a change of scenery guy and you go talk to some other team who has a defenseman who's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, and maybe you just make a 1-for-1 there just to try to spark things. He does very much make those types of moves as well. So I'm not going to rule out something at the deadline. It's going to be tricky, but this team is full steam ahead on postseason, on the postseason picture. So unless they fall completely out of it, he's going to be looking to try to add something to further this team into March and April.
Want to end this on an optimistic note. You've mentioned all the injuries. Give me the name of a Wild player who has taken advantage of opportunities given to him as a result of these injured players being out.
Well, it was exactly the thing that I think the Wild needed, as Matt Boldy scored 2 goals against Columbus, 2 power play goals. I had been clamoring for Mr. March that we saw last year from Boldy when Kaprizov was hurt. He scored 12 goals in the month of March and really kind of took the lead for this team. The Wild need that until Kaprizov is ready to return. And so if they can get that from Boldy here over the next couple of weeks, that's going to be massive. But the one I will say that continues to just wow me is Brock Faber. You know, now that Connor Bedard is going to be out for a while, Faber and Rossi could end up climbing into the Calder Trophy race. Faber just so solid. He had 3 assists against the Blue Jackets. And he just makes it look effortless. And so if he can continue to get opportunities with Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin both out of the lineup, if he continues to lead defensively, this is a team that can probably surprise some people until their full lineup is ready to return.
Seth, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can follow Locked On Wild by searching Locked On Wild on social media. We got the easy route on all the handles, so just search at Locked On Wild. You can follow us on your favorite audio platforms. You can follow us on YouTube as well. Just make sure to give us a like and tune in for all the Minnesota Wild news and notes you can handle throughout the week.
All right, Seth, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And the app is so easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet, like live, same-game parlays. You could find new bets in the new Explore tab, or you can head over to the Parlay Hub to make a parlay. That's the best place to find out the most popular parlays, and there's a lot more. And look, you've got the NFL, you've got college football bowl season coming up, you've got pro and college basketball, and of course the NHL. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.